4:30. Call this meeting to order. This is April 2nd, 2024. We are the Carmel-by-the-Sea City Council. Nova, could we get a roll call, please?
Sure. Councilmember Barron?
Here.
Councilmember Dramoff? Here. Councilmember Ferlito?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Here.
Mayor Potter?
Here.
All are present.
Very good. All right, Bobby, could you lead us in the pledge, please?
Sure. Rise. Ready? Begin. We need those little kids
Yeah,
here.
you need to get it a little more up, get up the tempo on that a little bit. All right, we have extraordinary business. We have the Carmel High School report out. There's nobody here for that, I believe. But so let's move on to the Volunteer Appreciation Proclamation. Karen, would you be that good enough to read that for me, please?
Yes. City of Carmel-by-the-Sea, City Council Proclamation. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea proclaiming the week of April 14th to the 20th, 2024, as National Volunteer Appreciation Week in conjunction with the National Volunteer Appreciation Week. Whereas National Volunteer Week was first established in April 1974 by presidential proclamation and is observed the third week of April, and whereas this year's National Volunteer Week is observed April 14th through the 20th, 2024, and whereas the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea recognizes that the involvement of volunteers is vitally important in augmenting essential public services provided by city departments and our community, and whereas the City Council would like to recognize and thank the efforts of the volunteer groups and individuals that assist the city, and whereas the hours, work, and contributions these groups and individuals donate to the city during events, meetings, storms, village beautification, and village safety are immeasurable and an asset to the community and the city. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Karen Ferlito, on behalf of Dave Potter, Mayor of the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea, on behalf of the City Council, thank the following volunteer groups that assist the city: Carmel Cares, Carmel Community Emergency Response Team, Carmel Host Lions, Carmel Public Library Foundation, Carmel-by-the-Sea Garden Club, Carmel-by-the-Sea Rotary Club, Community Activities Commissioners, Forest and Beach Commissioners, Friends of Carmel Forest, Friends of Mission Trail Nature Preserve, Friends of Sunset Foundation, Friends of the Harrison Memorial Library, Harrison Memorial Board of Trustees, Historic Resources Board Commissioners, Lester Roundtree Native Plant Garden Committee, Library Volunteers, Planning Commissioners, and volunteers in police service. Thank you. And we have proclamations for each of those groups.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. Most appropriate. All right, let's move on then to public
Do you think
appearance.
there are any of the representatives here? I see Graham with the Rotary. and the library. And the library board.
Yeah, so we put this on the agenda with the intent of reaching out. It didn't time out to have Volunteer Appreciation Week, so the Community Activities Department has some plans for further celebration of volunteers at Earth and Arbor Day and in the Pine Cone as well, recognition. So we'll be getting these to each of the volunteer groups. So thank you for reading it, Karen.
Okay,
Thank you,
here's
Ashley.
one to go with the others.
Yes.
So Graham Robertson, representing Carmel Rotary. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Carmel-by-the-Sea, we appreciate the proclamation, and we look forward to continuing our good work in the community, collaborating with all the other groups. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to speak? All right, seeing no one, we'll then move on to public appearance. It's an opportunity for any member of the public to speak on an item that is not on today's agenda. 3-minute limitation on the testimony. State your name for the record. I'd appreciate it. Anybody wishing to speak?
Hello. I'm D.L. Johnson. I'm your representative to the Transportation Agency for Monterey County, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Facilities Advisory Committee. And one of our goals this year is that we're to make a quick report to our representative communities on things we have been discussing and things we have voted on. And so I thought, okay, I'll come in and talk to you guys about a couple of the last few things. I will go as quickly as possible because I have 3 items. Last February, the meeting considered a considerable amount of time discussing 10 new bills that deal with e-bikes. Now, e-bikes is not a problem here in Carmel. We love them, and they're being used, and there's no way that these bills are trying to quell any of the use of e-bikes, only trying to clarify their relations in relation to the state bicycle codes that already exist, which e-bikes fall under. There have been some great examples. They're going to start enforcing helmet laws. They're going to start allowing cities to consider speed limits on rec trails. They're going to clarify certain types of e-bikes, the categories, because now we have a bike that is electric but has no pedals. Well, the problem is that now is either an e-bike or it's an electric motorcycle, and kids are riding them, and they ride them here in town. And so that has come up. There also, a big one is they're going to consider, the state is going to probably mandate that there'll be an age limit to which kids can ride an e-bike at all. And that will be eventually, I heard the rule was 12 now, so at the age of 12. And so those are some of the things. TAMSI also is considering some home-to-school issues. As there are no schools within Carmel-by-the-Sea, it does affect Carmel Unified because we have not been qualified for any home-to-school funds in the last few years because TAMSI's focused on working with cities that have schools in their city limits because it's an obvious pairing to get some help. Well, I have made a recommendation that they move to school districts that have schools that are not located within school districts where home school funds are available. And those topics will be reviewed tomorrow night at Salinas and Salinas. My second topic, I would like to thank the city for installing security cameras around the city. My wife has been working for several years for Kochek Jewelers. Last year, when there was several robberies and smash and grab incidents focused on jewelry stores in our area, store owners and workers were very spooked, and the jewelry store owners made some changes to improve security in their stores, and of course your cameras were icing on the cake as far as they were concerned. They're very happy about that, and you should be praised for doing that, and I am too as a citizen of your town. Finally, some of you know that I'm the co-director of the Del Monte Brass at the Naval Postgraduate School, and that's why I'm rushing, because there's a rehearsal that already has started, and I'm supposed to be there. But I wanted to talk to you. I want to let you guys know you have the opportunity to invite this group again for other events. You people know of events that are occurring in this community and this area. Please take the time to consider. They have their own website. This group has gotten very, very good over the last few years since Dr. Rob Clevin took over. I'm the assistant director, and Gary Stotts is the manager. And it is run, we're not a military group, but we serve the military community a lot. We did 20 performances last year. We will have over 25 performances this year. And now we're trying to go out into the community more. As we did here for you for the Christmas tree lighting. You may remember the band played for your Christmas tree. We did an hour concert for you guys. So there are all kinds of things. So I just want to let you know whether you want, this group does everything. If you want Led Zeppelin, we'll do Led Zeppelin. If you want Earth, Wind, and Fire, we'll do that. If you want Journey, if you want Glenn Miller or Sinatra, we will do that. We have done the Star Spangled Banner to Sousa marches to classical literature, whatever is needed for the event. Usually we play before events. We do dance music for those. There are about 45 members now in that group, and they're all military soldiers studying for their master's degrees at the DLI and Naval Postgraduate School. And there are a few regular people like me who are not involved in the military. It is not a military group, and it is not run by the federal government or anything. It's all volunteers, and it doesn't cost you a dime to ask them to come and play. These people just love to perform. And I'll leave some cards with her if you want to get in touch with me. And that's all I had to say. If you have any questions, ask me. If there's anything you want me to take to tomorrow night's meeting in Salinas, to Tamsy, let me know. I'd be happy to represent. I've been representing you guys very diligently for the last 10 years. And I've been on that board for 18 years. So thank you.
Dennis, thank you very much. I appreciate your participation. And as far as TAMSI goes, perhaps next time you could do under reports out or extraordinary business. That'd give you a little more time.
No,
You wouldn't be
that's
constrained.
fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak today under public comment?
Their hands.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Lacey Rock. I'm a resident of Seaside, but frequent the shops and restaurants of Carmel-by-the-Sea. Over the past couple of months, I've been working with the California Green Business Network. The California Green Business Network is a nonprofit organization that supports cost-saving and environmental improvements to the small and medium-sized business sector. Monterey County, including the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea, have been supported by the California Green Business Network on and off for the last 15 years. We go door to door to provide support and technical assistance to businesses that are interested in transitioning to green business practices such as lighting upgrades, water and waste reduction, and we also do specialized support for communities that have plastic ordinances or need additional assistance with meeting SB 1383 requirements, for example. This support happening throughout Monterey County has been heavily subsidized by state funding in the past. Our state funding, which accounts for half of the operational budget, will be lost this next fiscal year. As a result, the programs that have been subsidized, like the one supporting Carmel-by-the-Sea, will end. In order to ensure the good work of this program still continues in the area, I'm reaching out to various local jurisdictions and agencies with the approach that if everyone gives a little, no one will have to give a lot to ensure this program can continue. We are requesting $10,000 to $20,000 per jurisdiction to ensure the program continues. 3 other jurisdictions are moving forward with integrating this into their upcoming budget requests. Supporting this program will provide membership in the network, which includes access to Green Biz Tracker, an online tool providing quantifiable environmental impacts for participating jurisdictions. So this would mean Carmel-by-the-Sea would receive a report that would include, for their businesses that have participated, numbers of greenhouse gas emissions reduced, water saved, waste reduced, etc. Participation also includes the potential for prebates for businesses to help them purchase items like reusable foodware or safer cleaning products. Business recognition on social media and in-person events occurs, and we also partner with regional agencies like Green Waste to complete waste audits, or with 3CE to provide information on energy incentives businesses might be eligible for. For Carmel, providing this funding and doing this work will also have the added benefit of supporting your climate action plan, specifically goal 1.2.5 on page 12, which states, initiate a green business certification program for businesses that follow the California Green Business Program standards. I've had multiple conversations with staff about the program, and they've been very supportive, but the budget decision ultimately lies with council and the administrative team. I hope you will consider this request, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well done. Does anybody else wish to speak in the room here? Anybody else wish to speak? Do you wish to speak, sir?
Is this public?
Yes, this is public comment. Items that are not on tonight's agenda.
Yes, my name is Dennis Gerber. I live on Mission Street, across the street from the Sunset Center parking lot, and I've read about the new plan for developing the parking lots at Sunset for
Sir, this would fall
housing?
under probably item number 5 then, which is the consideration of the housing element plan. If you'd like to speak then, that'd probably be appropriate.
So actually,
It's an agendized item. Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? All right, I see Andy Carr has her hand up in the Zoom world. Andy?
Yes, but my comment, who else would like you to? I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My comment is also regarding the housing element. So I wasn't sure. I saw on the agenda that it was going to be continued, so I didn't think I was allowed to speak then. But you're saying public comment will be allowed at that time?
Yes, I am.
Okay, then I will speak then. Thank you.
Andy. Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Oh.
There are no other hands raised.
All right, nobody else in the room here? All right, close the public comment period, bring it over to council. So we got announcements. Anybody from administration?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have some words of thanks. I wanted to thank staff. I thank staff for the storm response. That's the PD, our fire department, and our public works department. Hopefully we're out of the winter storms, but if not, we'll be there to help take care of the village. I want to reinforce Councilmember Filito's words of thanks and Ms. Wright's words of thanks for our volunteer groups. We really couldn't do it without you, so thank you so much, volunteer groups. I want to thank the people who have been involved in our recent public meetings, especially last week when we had our council priorities setting, so that was a great turnout. Thank you so much. And I wanted to thank Brandon Swanson for volunteering to be my assistant city administrator. After a rigorous review process and screening process, he has reluctantly agreed to be assistant city administrator, and I wanted to thank him publicly and welcome him aboard. His first day, official day on the job was yesterday. So thank you for coming back today.
It's also not a volunteer job. Don't screw up. All right, anybody else? Okay, we'll move on then, Counselor.
Attorney?
I would report that we had some closed sessions yesterday afternoon, and there's no reportable action from those closed sessions.
Any council member comments? Jeff?
Yes, thank you, Dave. I would like to thank everybody who showed up for all of the police station tours on Friday. The 3 here that we had in the morning, and especially I see at least one person in the room here who journeyed over to Salinas to see one city's version of what is possible with the police station. So thank you for participating, and we look forward to more of the same.
I just said pile on there. I'd like to thank Chief Tomasi for Paul. An excellent job. I know it was a little redundant, but you did a great job. Really, thank you very much. I appreciate the public attending too. All right, anybody else?
I'd just like to give a quick shout out to a book that I picked up the other day, and it's called The Sisterhood, The Women of the CIA. And if you look in it, the index, just for example, this entire box here is all pages that Sue McLeod were mentioned and interviewed. And I think that's pretty impressive when people like Gorbachev got 1 mention and Sue McLeod got about 25. So anyways, that's for Sue McLeod.
Thank you, Bobby. All right, then why don't we move on then to orders of business, which is receive a report from the library foundation. Oh, sorry, did anybody? Yeah, well, yeah, why don't I go ahead? So Karen's brought up an interesting point. Item number 6 is going to be continued. It was not noticed properly, but not the fault of the city. But the applicant's representative did not represent it correctly, so we're going to have to delay that item. If you're here for item number 6, it'll be continued.
That's the Milzak contract for the Cypress Inn.
Okay. Ashley, welcome.
Good evening, officially, Mayor and Council. This evening, I'm here to talk about the Library Facilities Master Plan, the Phase 1 report that we received from Jason Architect. And I'm going to be tag teaming this presentation with Public Works Director Bob Harari as we go through this, since his department helps manage the maintenance of our facilities and help review our facilities master plan. So just to get started, and sometimes I do these things because not everybody knows about the libraries and what we do. We have 2 library facilities here in the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea. The Harrison Memorial Library, which serves adults and teens and houses our meeting room, the gathering place. And then the Park Branch Library, which serves our children and families, as well as researchers using the local history department that houses the archives of Carmel. And I'm going to let Bob jump in here and talk about, what maintenance. I think this is important because this came up during our most recent review of the capital improvement program for next year, but what is the state of our buildings? And so this is getting into some of the detail about the work that's been done over the years and what is proposed in the Phase 1. Take it away. Thank you, Bob.
Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Ashley. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Council. So as Ashley was saying, I'm going to focus on some of the maintenance projects that we completed at both projects over the past 5 or 10 years, and then delve more into the condition assessment
reports that were prepared for both buildings. So starting with the Harrison Memorial Library, the project was designed by Bernard Maybach. It was initially built in 28, expanded in 1949. Now, over the course of time, there have been prior seismic upgrades, but those are no longer sufficient to meet current standards. There have been interior remodels. There's been other maintenance projects done along the way. It's 7,300 square feet. So over the past, mostly 5, but maybe 10 years, we replaced the ventilation system for the public restrooms. We replaced the furnaces. We replaced portions of the HVAC system. We fixed cracked windows in the reading room. We replaced the cooling unit in the computer room. Installed energy efficient lighting. We built the gathering room project. Let's see, ADA upgrade projects continue. In fact, we just are finishing up new railings along the back of the building on 6th Avenue. We had some relocate shelves. It's a frequent project that's requested by the library. During COVID, we had to maintain the air purifier systems. We just finished painting the interior of the basement, although there's a punch list, and imminently, don't know a date, imminently we're going to be painting the exterior of the Memorial Library. Moving on to the Park Branch. It was previously Crocker Bank. It was purchased by the city in 1988 and remodeled and opened as a Park Branch Library in 1989. It is 6,300 square feet. Over the past 5-10 years, we replaced and upgraded the basement sump pump. We replaced the furnace there as well. We replaced portions of the HVAC system. About 7 years ago, there was an interior painting and carpet replacement project. We removed the steps in the story time room, the children's library, to provide additional space. Recently, we fixed emergency exit stairs. We installed energy efficient lighting. We shifted shelves around. And also, last month, we decommissioned the unused dumbwaiter to Park Branch. Master Plan Phase 1, this was a fiscal year 22-23 capital improvement project. It was funded by the city at $50,000 to start. Through a qualification-based selection process, Jason Architecture was selected to provide the Phase 1 of the master plan. In January 23, council entered into the professional services agreement with a 5-year term. Now, basically, the Jason Architecture had 4 tasks to do that was completed by last summer. The 4 tasks was to do a condition assessment of both buildings, which is what we'll talk about next. Next is to propose space programming improvements that Ashley's going to cover. They also provided some cost estimates and schedules and information of that nature, and they prepared a comprehensive master plan report, which is in your packet this evening. So the question is, why was Jason selected? Well, they have diverse experience with civic buildings and community centers, but they also have specific expertise in the design of public libraries. Most recently, they completed design work for 5 branches of the Santa Cruz Public Library System, and they'll be designing their new downtown library building as well. Their team is supplemented by high-quality engineers and other consultants and cost estimating firm for their project. The condition assessment revealed significant upgrades are needed due to deferred maintenance, due to the age of the buildings, due to deteriorated and inefficient building systems, and outdated space layouts. Now, for those of you who have been in the library, there shouldn't be a big surprise that areas of both of these buildings are outdated and need some remodeling. Moving on to the condition of the Harrison Memorial Library. It's in your packet. I'm just going to highlight the big items and the potentially the more expensive items. Architectural finishes are needed throughout the main library: ceilings, flooring, painting, finishes, furniture. Costly seismic upgrades are required. It's not an option to meet the building code. The electrical system was really found to be in disrepair. It's very outdated. It's essentially a rebuild. Service from PG&E needs to be upgraded, replace the switchgear, panels, distribution systems, upgrade the lighting systems. While we're doing the electrical work, we should implement energy efficiency building systems like a central building management system so that we can carry on in an energy efficient manner. Mechanical wasn't as deemed as bad. We do have some newer mechanical equipment, so it's not a complete redo, but certainly other mechanical equipment is nearing the end of its useful life. It needs to be replaced. Plumbing needs new water service. We need to inspect the sewer laterals and other plumbing items were found to be deficient. ADA is also another big ticket item. A disabled person would have a tough time getting to the front door. There's no elevator in the 5-level building. So I'll leave it at that. Park Branch Library, although it's more up to date in terms of painting and carpeting, there's still many areas of the building that need new ceilings, flooring, painting, finishes, furniture. It also needs a structural seismic update. Electrical system, much like the Harrison Memorial Library. In fact, a lot of the electrical system is in disrepair. We need upgraded service in PG&E. We need to replace all the main electrical switchgear, panels, and distribution system. Upgrade the lighting systems. Again, we should implement central building management systems. Mechanical, also similar to Harrison Memorial Library, some newer equipment, some older equipment. Plumbing, we need to upgrade the water service. We need to inspect the sewer lateral. Accessibility upgrades, ADA, we don't have an ADA compliant parking space in the parking lot. We have a non-compliant space. We have a non-compliant ramp up to the front doors of the building. I think the biggest challenge, at least in my opinion, is the water intrusion in the basement. The project was built at an underground stream. The stream, it's there. That's why we recently replaced the emergency backup generator to make sure that the sump pumps in the basement are operating at all times, because the building has flooded in the past. I think we're in good shape today, but it's an ongoing problem. It's not waterproof in the basement. We also have windows and exterior siding issues, and if you recall CIP last week, we talked about a request for a $45,000 project to work on, I think, 18 windows. This building, we also have exterior ductwork on the west side, which is a little unconventional in Carmel. We tried to paint it a few years ago, but it's an eyesore. This building needs a new PG&E transformer in the parking lot. And before I turn it back over to Ashley, I just wanted to point out some of the things that were not in the master plan yet, but need to be considered going into the next phase, which is the schematic design. Hazardous materials. There's lead and asbestos in both buildings that needs to be looked at. I suggested the library board of trustees a couple weeks ago that they consider swing space to keep the buildings operating during construction or remodeling. And although I believe Ashley walks on water, we need project management support when we get into the actual design of these buildings. There's going to be a lot of work. And with that, I'd be happy to turn it back over to Ash.
Thank you so much, Bob. Okay, and continuing on. So this document really helps us to understand what's behind the walls in the building, and it serves us as a foundation for moving forward with renovations for the Harrison and the Park Branch libraries in the future. Included in this, as Bob mentioned, is also some conceptual design drawings. I know they're very eye-catching, and they propose some programmatic relocations within the building. So that's how where things are located, where departments are located that help us do our job better and serve the public better. So you'll notice the relocation of the historical archives where it's been housed at the Park Branch over to the Harrison, and moving the gathering place upstairs in the mezzanine. And then the relocation of the teen area over to the Park Branch, which is, a great area to be for kids transitioning over to that space, but also very close to Bruno's for sandwiches and snacks after school. I want to also talk about the exteriors of the Harrison building. No changes there. This is a historic building. We're not changing the look. We're expanding it or knocking it down. That would never ever happen. So that would be very, very minimal exterior changes to preserve its historic characters. We know it's going to be painted, which will help seal some things and preserve it. The Park Branch Library, there are some significant exterior and interior improvements, including new garden spaces. And I pulled just a few pictures from the report itself just to flip through. And this is, of course, the Harrison Library Building Reading Room. If you've got your back to the big picture window of what this is, a possibility for what this could look like into the future. New local history department, very similar with the wood paneling to what we have before. Meeting room, also very similar to what looks like now. And then some additional seating area upstairs and fiction. And then, of course, new Park Branch with a big focus on green space around the building. And seating areas for people to be out and about and around in that area. Nice and light and airy. This would be the new teen lounge. And then the kids' library, of course, with a proposed garden in the back that we could open up when the weather's nice and have a play space outside for kids and a space for story time and all the fun programs we do to be able to expand that so that we're not just looking out into a parking lot, which is what we do now. And I do want to emphasize that those are just conceptual drawings. We're in such early stages, and I think the biggest takeaway from the facilities master plan should be all of the things we now know will need to be renovated in terms of what's behind the wall. So the drawings are a good jumping off point for creativity, but the biggest focus should be that we now know what is going to fail us in the future and what we should be thinking about in terms of renovation. So for fiscal year 23-24, the City Council included phases 2 through 5 of the library facilities master plan. That would include conceptual design, so moving more of that forward, schematic design, community outreach, which is critical with a project like this, design development, and construction documents. This has not, phases 2 through 5, as they were proposed by Jason, have not progressed at this point. And staff did actually request that this be carried over into fiscal year 24-25, which prompted the request for this presentation for what's happening with phase 1. And so here we are. What have we been doing in the meantime since we've had this phase 1? We know that there is so much critical infrastructure work that needs to be done in the city of Carmel and all of our facilities. And staff and the library board of trustees, master plan ad hoc committee have been working with representatives of the Carmel Public Library Foundation over the last month to talk about this project and the potential for this project. As you know, the Carmel Public Library Foundation's mission is to keep the library open, relevant, and thriving. They raise the funds for all of our operating materials, books, equipment, furniture, everything that happens inside of the library. Programs, performers, that's the Carmel Public Library Foundation at work. And so we've been talking to them, and they did fund the Gathering Place project. That was a donor-based project that came up with some opportunities through conversations with locals, and so that was a unique project that kind of got us thinking. And so here we are with this facilities phase 1 master plan. And so the Carmel Public Library Foundation has determined that they would like to focus on raising funds for the Harrison Memorial Library building to start, and that an architect be engaged who specializes in historic buildings, especially one with experience with Mabeck buildings, to start work on a Harrison renovation restoration project. That will necessitate a request for proposals to see what we find out there for who can work on a building like the Harrison Memorial Library, which is, right there on Ocean Avenue, right there at the heart of our village, and so important to so many people. And I do want to underline something that that Bob said earlier in terms of continuity of operations that would be taken incredibly seriously. We know the pandemic scars linger with being closed, and so that would definitely be a part of any sort of renovation project for either library building going forward. And again, tons of community outreach when we are in that phase of the project to be done still. So I am happy to answer any questions. Bob is also here to answer any questions that I cannot answer. And if you have any direction, thoughts that's where we are at now. And I know we have Alexandra Fallon and Marcimo, who are both with the Carmel Public Library Foundation, if you have questions for them as well.
Thank you, Ashley. Alessandra.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got two questions. What was the reasoning behind moving the historical archives from the Park Branch to the Harrison Library, and where will they be stored?
So, so that idea came out of moving the historic archives to the historic building. The Park Branch primarily serves children and families, and so while it made sense at the time to have both of those things there, because originally the archives didn't fit at the Harrison building, the architect Jason proposed that in this phase now. Whether that moves forward, I don't know, and I have lots of questions as staff. So I look at these drawings, I must say, I look at these drawings and I say, oh, they're very pretty and everything's the same color and there's no dents in the walls and that's great. But I have lots of questions like, where will things be stored? Because you don't see that kind of same vault storage area. So that is a question for much further down the line, and I have a list of them for when we get there.
Okay, could I just follow up on that, and then I've got
Please.
one more question. And then would there be a local history library in the Harrison Memorial Library?
Yes, so essentially that would be the same thing. We'd just be plopping that department over so people would be doing research, historic research in the historic building, and have access to all of those records there.
Okay, got it. And then this, I know this will be a little bit controversial, but I know in some of the research that I have done, I feel like MJ Murphy is being slighted a little bit, because from what I've understood, Bernard Maybeck was the supervising architect, but Murphy did the plan. So I just kind of want to give Murphy his due.
No, and I appreciate that very much. I know that Doug Schmitz did a talk for the library in that reading room on that very thing. So no, we do not want to slight Mr. Murphy at all, because he is the man that built this peninsula and so many places on there. So we will make sure he gets his due.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Ashley? I don't see anybody. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we go ahead. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item tonight? Please, if you'd like to speak, do come forward. I'm not seeing anybody. Anybody in Zoom? All right, bring it back to council then. Karen?
Well, I am very excited to see progress on this and see more reports in the future and more ideas that come forth. I did take a little field trip because I wanted to see a newly built library up in Aptos. And they got to the point where their library was in such disrepair they had to do a ground up. But it was some really nice innovations in there for people to be able to be in rooms to do projects, and a community room, and lots of nice colors. So it was nice to see what can be done, and I'm glad we don't have to do a ground up, that ours haven't deteriorated to that point. But I think it's really exciting. I'm going to put in this plug for John. I just want to plug for Saturday hours. No matter what we do in the future as far as renovating, I think Saturday hours are critical for families, and we have to get that back as soon as possible. So there's my plug. And I believe in that too. I mean, people work all week and then the library's closed. So please, that should be a priority. Thank you.
Jeff?
Thank you, Dave. So I have a few questions. You said that the drawings are really pretty, and I agree with that. My question is there a do you have hard copies of the master plan?
Of the plan that was included as the attachments to the staff report?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
So the master plan is like finished? The library master plan is...
Phase one of the master plan is finished. So when we talk about schematic designs and anything beyond that, no, that part hasn't been tackled yet.
So I'm like wearing sort of a project manager hat here. So I think we should have requirements before we start doing design. So my question is, if we're embarking on sort of this phase 2 part, do we have words on paper that describe what the goals of the phase 2 are going to be?
Yes.
Like, and this sort of goes to, like, I would like to see, like, before we sort of progress too much further, I mean, I would like to, before we sort of go down the perspective of sort of designing a renovation to the building, I mean, I would like to see the requirements document, which is the library facilities master plan, and have that vetted by either this body or the library, the board of trustees, so that we go down the plan that the public is sort of familiar with, and we don't go down some plan that just looks pretty and doesn't meet sort of functional needs.
Right.
So is that?
Yes, so I mentioned earlier that looking for an architect with specific historic experience, that would be the request for proposals for an architect, where we would put all of those details in for what we're looking for the next step. So they've got this phase one to build off of, where they've seen, some other architects' drawings, but also they know now, baseline, what's behind the walls. So then we can start to move forward with that. But that's what a request for proposals would get at. What do we want to see from them in terms of next phases? But what is really important to us, in particular with the Harrison building, that we want to make sure is maintained, what is also important in terms of functionality. And again, the functionality pieces, that's a part that comes in at different processes from design.
The thing that I'm struggling with a little bit is that, who's going to write that requirements document? Like we have an architect that we've hired, Jason Architecture, that specializes in libraries, and I understand that they are not. I've heard that they may not, that firm may not be doing sort of the design work on the library or whatever that might be, but it seems like the work done to describe like how Carmel envisions a library, like they are the firm to do that. And I'm struggling with hiring another firm to then describe what the work the other firm is going to do. Like we wouldn't, the police station, like we're trying to define what the police station requirements are. Mm-hmm. Like that's what the current process is before we set about doing design work on the police station, right? Do we need an evidence room? Do we need a locker room? Do we need a gym? Do we need secure parking? Like all those things are things that the city needs. And we're not going to put that stuff aside and say when we hire an architect, the architect that designs that stuff will design what their functional requirements are. And so I'm struggling with how it seems like we're sort of putting the cart before the horse here.
Yeah, I would answer because, I think that Jason Architects, this is what they do. So they can give us a recipe, a menu of items, and then Ashley can work with the Library Board of Trustees and CPLF and the community, and eventually you can see the RFP before it's issued, council member.
So the requirements that Jason Architects and the combination of the local groups, the Board of Trustees and the CPLF, that stuff will be put into a document, the library master plan, which will be sort of elucidated, wrong word, but elucidated in the RFP specifically for the person that's going to design. Yeah, and Jason can, they can submit a proposal as well. So, but again, since they're professionals, they can tell us, the functionality of a contemporary library and what those needs are. But we need to look at the professionals, obviously the librarians.
Right, and
so
some
that
of
we
those...
don't build something that's immediately.
I'm just trying to draw that line between doing all this requirements analysis first, and then issuing the RFP, like having there be a bright line between the RFP. The RFP is going to describe what the second architect will do. Like the second architect will design buildings to that RFP, and that RFP is going to be developed by Jason and presumably approved by this body or the library board. No, the RFP will be designed by her, but with input from people like Jason.
Right. So with the work that Jason has done, they have a sketch of phases 2 through 5, which is what I've been working off in my brain for next steps, getting us through construction. Right. So ideally, we'd find an architect that would take their work into account and then move us through phases that would be similar to that. And that would be community engagement, schematic design. And the schematic design gets into the nitty-gritty of the functionality of the buildings and what staff needs. So all of those things are yet to come. But it is very critical, and that's why I have been talking to the foundation, and we've started to kind of work on drafts for an RFP that touches on everything that we want to get at and we want to see from an architect to bring us through, hopefully, to the end of the project.
I don't want to, before I move on to the next point, I don't just close out this point and say it troubles me a little bit to be seeing architectural designs for a building whose purpose we don't exactly know. Like the purpose is expressed in the RFP. right?
Yeah.
Like it'll have a reading room and it'll have parking and it'll have all these things. And so it troubles me a little bit to see architectural designs. Like, we've sort of, I believe form follows function. And I'm troubled a little bit by seeing the form when I don't really understand, like there's nothing on paper that describes what the function is yet. Like that's not, when we design a house.
That would be coming
when
next.
we design a house.
Yeah, I think that the
I
images.
think, I would say that I would like to see it first. Like I would like to understand what the function is. We need parking spaces before we start seeing, a picture of a library with a big plaza in the front, and I can't really tell whether their parking spaces are still there, whatever it is.
We'll make sure
So
that we
that's-
bring back the needs assessment from the librarian's perspective. I mean, these are purely schematic. They're ideas of what could be, not necessarily will be. But I get your message, Councilmember.
And then the other thing is when we embark on this project, that's going to cost, 10 or $20 million or however much money it's going to cost. I understand that there's talk that the CPLF, and thank you very much, will be footing a lot of the bill. But who is the city will have costs with a project manager managing the, the construction work to a city building. Who's going to pay the firm that does the construction work? Like who's going to write those checks?
Well, I mean, Mr. Pierix, again, since it's a city asset, we have the responsibility of following our purchasing code. And so much like we did, 20 years ago, the Sunset Center, the funds would flow through the city.
Okay, so in the end, the person that's going to sign off on all the work, the person that's going to approve all the work and all that stuff is going to be the city.
Yes, sir.
So there will be an arrangement if the CPLF fronts a lot of the money. It's still the case that the city will be responsible. There's still a city project, like, it's Carmel City funded by the CPLF.
Yeah.
And those people report to you.
Yes, sir. But let me add that again, by the time we get to that phase, there'll be, kind of buy off on the design and the actual design from the multiple interest groups. So
In the city.
the trustees, the city, CPLF, the community, prior to us getting to that phase, which is a lot farther down the road.
Thank you.
I might also say I've been part of a working group that's been dealing with Jeff, and it's been very, very successful. I think it really makes a difference to have me there representing the city and the council, making sure that the things that you just brought up are being addressed. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Right, any other comments? Yeah.
I would just hope that they're going to work hand in hand together. I mean, it's the city project, but the CPLF is have a lot to say. And a lot,
We want their
yeah,
involvement.
I mean, so I think that's going to be the proper marriage. And I think, Jeff, I understand what you're saying, but it's probably different than the police station as far as an assessment needs and the architectural design. I think the library is trying to do both with the same architect. Is that correct?
Where it's kind of both at the same time.
Yeah.
There's,
Where I think it's
a little
different with
the
the police
facilities are
because-
different, so I
Yeah.
think we're not there yet. But
Because with the
yes.
police, we needed to know from a professional what we needed. They weren't designing the ultimate project,
Yeah.
ultimately designing the project.
and I would say for libraries, the most critical thing at this point, and probably Ms. Ferlito saw that when she did her tour of a library, is flexibility. Because libraries can be anything and want to be able to do that into the future. So thank you all for receiving this report, and I look forward to being back here and giving more reports as we move forward with this in the future.
Thank you. I actually appreciate it. Well done. All right, why don't we move on to the public hearings? First item is an adoption of a resolution declaring a dead Monterey pine tree on private property, the southeast corner of Casanova and 11th Avenue, public nuisance, and establishing a subsequent public hearing for May 7th. Evan? Justin.
All right. Can you hear me?
Justin.
Perfect. Hi, council, staff. I'm Justin Ono, City Forester, and as we saw on the tour earlier, I'm asking you to adopt a resolution to declare a dead tree at the corner of 11th and Casanova a public nuisance. The tree is on private property, and we're trying to go through the proper process to get the hazard abated and the nuisance remediated. A little bit of background. Like as I said, a very large dead Monterey pine tree sits on the property at the southeast corner of 11th and Casanova. The tree has been dead for at least 5 to 6 months. It has a lean towards the right-of-way and also over the secondary power lines. Multiple neighbors have come forward with complaints over the dead tree and the fact that it's just been sitting there. No one knows how to get a hold of the owner. The property is vacant at the time. At the moment, a house burned down there in 2004, killing where the original owner died in the fire, and this passing on in a trust to the son, who was in the military, I believe. That's the last known residence as an APO in Western Europe. We have tried to send letters to the last known address through the county assessor with no luck, and so we had sent a letter, certified mail, to the last record that we could find through our historical documents, and it was returned with no answer. So we're going through because we can't get a response from anyone responsible for the property, we are trying to go through the process of the nuisance tree process outlined in Carmel Municipal Code, Chapter 17.48.130, and we're asking you to make a formal declaration of the tree as a nuisance so we can move forward in abating it. Again, this is the basic part of the municipal code that the city forester can deem a tree or plant a nuisance, and normally we'd send a letter asking or telling the owner of the property to abate the nuisance, but as I said, we've sent the letter and have had no response from the owner of the property. So again, more of the city code of what we've done. We've sent a letter to the owner, and they did not. We waited 30 days, and they have not abated it or gotten back to us. So now we're making notice to you per the code and holding the nuisance hearing. Here is our timeline of what we've done. The tree was found during some work nearby. An oak tree fell a couple houses away, and while the crew was removing the oak tree, the tree was seen, and we'd also had gotten several comments from neighbors about a dead tree in the area, and we're out there, and the neighbor came by and complained about it, and we've gotten 3 or 4 since then. And we're just saying that we're going through the process because we can't just go cut down trees on people's private property. Mid-November, after it was assessed, I saw the tree is dead. We drafted the letter and attempted to send it to the last known address from the assessor's website, and the post office said that it was not a real address, that they couldn't get the zip code for the APO, wouldn't work, so we found the other letter. It went off in December. The 30 days went by, the letter was returned, so we started this nuisance process and tried to get it on the council agenda, and we're finally getting it here now. So I'm presenting this to you to adopt the declaration, and then once it's this tree is assessed as a nuisance, will be prominent posting on the site so people can see it and have any complaints or what is the word? To air grievances about it at the next council meeting, and then if no one has any issues with it during the May meeting, it'll be formalized, and then we will go cut it down that week, and then we will get the fee from the contractor and any other fees associated, and present that to you in June to levy the fines against the property taxes. This is the formal letter, notice, just an example. So I believe that is what we're asking here.
Any questions of Justin by council members?
I have a question, but this might be more for Brian, but concerning the same thing.
Well, go ahead and ask it.
Well, nuisance sounds like it's just a nuisance, but this looks like a considerable safety hazard because he does mention the power lines, and it also does sit over a fire hydrant that's an active fire hydrant. If that tree were to fall, either one of those things could be damaged. And so is there something stronger than a nuisance fee or nuisance that we could, make happen quicker? And then my other question is, if we did take it out, would we take out the stump as well?
Well, I'll take a shot at the first question. There may be emergency provisions that we can look at. We were following the code as it's presented. I didn't see an emergency exception in there. But the word nuisance doesn't mean to minimize its impact. It doesn't like, it's not like a fly is a nuisance. I mean, this is, a nuisance that can, for example, you can see on the screen here, that there's a clear and present danger to persons or property. So a nuisance can have a big impact like you're describing. As far as your other question, I defer.
To touch on that too, that nuisance is just the term that's used, and most local city codes have the same language. And it was assessed that it's not an imminent threat. It's dangerous, it's dead, it could lose branches, but it's not uprooting. And we have removed trees that were borderline public, private, that were lifting sidewalks as it was falling over. So an emergency is an emergency, and this wasn't declared an imminent emergency. In terms of the removal all the way down, we haven't gotten to the point of thinking about the stump. We could. I don't know if it would impact trees nearby. I think that it calls to just cut it to no higher than a 4-foot stump, but we'd probably cut it as low as we could with that the proximity to the garden wall that's existing.
I'm just asking because since ultimately the owner of the property is going to have to pay for this, it would be nice to get the stump out and plant a tree in replacement.
That's the other point is legally, we are abating the nuisance. I don't know if we can legally put a tree on private property.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Justin? Let's see, is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item? Good, okay. All right, anybody in Zoom? Thank you very much. All right, we'll bring it back to council for direction.
We'll start. Just a couple items. I feel like we're missing some facts, or at least I would have liked to have seen a copy of the letter that you sent, and I also would have liked to have seen a map with the property line because it is very close. I mean, I know you say that it is on the property, and you're probably okay with that, but I just would have liked, as a member of the council making this decision, to have seen that map with where it's located is in connection to the property line.
Okay, if it was public, we would have been cut down already.
No, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, as us making this decision, that it would have been helpful to have a map with the property and where the tree is located on there, just so we know 100% that it is on private property and not on city property.
Okay.
But I do have a comment. In light of the tragic circumstances with this property, I know some of us who have lived here that long remember that fire, and certainly the difficulties that the son has had, and he's a military veteran. I just feel that we could make an exception and have the city pay for this. I know, Chip, in years past, we've talked about having a city fund for people perhaps are indigent or have certain circumstances. I think this might fall under something where let's just do this as a city and not have this family have any more tragedy associated with this property.
All right, well, it's a suggestion. We'll take that under consideration. Are there any other comments or questions by council members?
Yes, my comment is I don't think we'll get any notice at all or reimbursement, actually. I think that the heir to this property is unreachable, because I know my husband was very interested in that lot, and we knew the man who lived there and tragically died that night in the fire. My husband tried several times to talk to the attorney that was handling it. Now it's, 2004, it's gone on many, many, many years. So I think we'll ultimately end up paying for it anyway, because we probably won't collect.
Yep, thank you. Eventually, and again, Mr. Pira can speak to this, if the property taxes aren't paid, then it would be, the county would auction, they would sell the property for the back taxes owed. So
And when that auction happens, then that lien gets paid.
that's correct, by the new buyer, if you will.
And is
Right.
there something that would start that process? I mean, could we find out if the taxes have been paid?
We can find out. I don't know how many years. I mean, if you don't pay your property taxes, they put you in the paper. Chip Rarick didn't pay it, and it's published admonishment, quite frankly. I don't know how many years it goes before our county assessor, Monterey County assessor, sells the property. I can look into that, council member. I don't know the answer though.
Thank you.
All right, council members, your druthers.
I would be willing to make a motion to adopt resolution 2024-25.
And I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All right, no, we have roll call, please.
Sure. Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Jerimoff?
No.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, let's move on then. We'll move to appeal number, consideration of appeal for the planning commission's decision to deny a track 1 design study referral and associated coastal development permit for the installation of a driveway gate located at Scenic Road 2 northwest of 8th Avenue in the single-family residential district.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself because I live
Yeah.
close to that property.
Very good, appreciate that, thank you. Evan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So the applicant has proposed the construction of a 4-foot tall driveway gate. The project was initially scheduled for the July 2023 Planning Commission hearing, however, was continued at the applicant's request. Following the continuation, the applicant submitted revised plans. So there are 2 designs before the council that you may consider. When the project did go to hearing, the Planning Commission ultimately denied the installation of the driveway gate and adopted Resolution 2024-003-PC. And then on February 6, 2024, the applicant submitted a timely appeal of the denial of the driveway gate. So neither the zoning code nor residential design guidelines explicitly address driveway gates. All of our documents address fences and gates separately. However, they do not address driveway gates as a single unit. Department practice, as well as the Planning Commission's policy, has been to align driveway gates with fences based on the application and description within the design guidelines. Gates are specifically described as pedestrian gates, whereas driveway gates really act and function more as an extension of a fence. So as you saw in your packet, the applicant did submit a appeal, and there is a outline of the applicant's appeal points, and just a summary is outlined on the screen. All of the appeal points argued or provided by the applicant were argued at the January 2024 Planning Commission meeting, and no new information has been presented that was not previously considered by the Planning Commission. The City Council has generally taken the position to uphold the Junior Border Commission's decision on matters of appeal, and as no new information has been presented that was not already considered by the Planning Commission, staff is recommending council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's decision as found in the associated resolution. So with that, staff's recommendation is that the council adopt the resolution as described on the screen. And then as an alternative, if the council wishes to explore options for permitting a driveway gate, staff recommends providing direction and specific findings specific to this project regarding the installation of a fence/driveway gate. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Evan. Are there any questions by council members at this time? I don't see anybody. Anybody in the public wish to speak this time?
I have a question. Can you describe the like the alternative of installing a gate sort of down by the driveway.
Sure.
You know, so the fence, rather than having the fence continue, so my question is, rather than having the fence continue from the front property line over the driveway to the south property line, the fence could take a 90-degree turn and travel along the driveway with another gate to the remainder of the front yard from the driveway, sort of closer to the house.
Yeah.
Was that option explored?
Yes, that is a recommendation that's often provided to applicants in lieu of a driveway gate. That alternative was suggested in the Planning Commission staff report. The applicant was not interested in exploring that option.
Thank you.
Is there a representative of the applicant present? How long do you need for your presentation?
My name is Eric Miller, architect representing the project. Can I have an overhead projector?
Mr. Miller, how long would you like for your presentation?
5 minutes.
You want to save some time for rebuttal?
I'd like to save some time for rebuttal.
Yeah. Set it for 5 minutes.
Okay, is it right there? Okay, so years ago, the Chadwicks came to me and asked me to design a house for them, a house on Scenic. And they were living in Carmel-by-the-Sea up in the neighborhood, and they had a great little house in a great neighborhood. And so I asked them, do you want to put a driveway gate in at the time? And at the time, it wasn't controversial at all. And they said, no, we love the social aspect of, someone's walking their dog, my neighbor's going down to get coffee, and they just loved talking to their neighbors, and they felt it was an important part of the social part of the neighborhood. So just maybe a year ago, they came back to me and said, listen, this is a different neighborhood. Farrah's actually worried about being at the house by herself. And it's understandable. People constantly knock on the door, asking to use the bathroom. People, directions, so I started thinking about that and why that would happen. So if you go down Ocean Avenue and you go south on Scenic, it's like a full wall complex on the west side. So here's where I'd like to put this on the overhead. If I can get this to work. So this is. Okay. So I guess this is. So this right, you see that's the laser right there? Okay. So this is a beautiful wall with ivy and a gate, but it's also a solid wall. So this is another wall with right here with a driveway and a gate. It's really beautiful, but it's like 7 feet high and it creates a compound. Here's another one. And I did go out on trash day, unfortunately, so all the cans are in front. And so there's another pretty much wall on the way down. So the problem is you walk down there, there's no door to knock on, you don't know where you are, you're a tourist maybe, you're out of town. So the first one that comes to front door is the Chadwick house. So right now, there's no gate here at all.
Excuse me, sir. My advice is you don't use that laser and point it so close to the council.
Oh, sorry.
If you want to point out something in your picture, go over to the overhead.
Okay. So this is the gate that we're proposing right here. Oh, thank you. This is now, this gate here is a solid gate. So we're proposing iron gates here and here. And the reason we think it's a reasonable thing to ask is because it's consistent with the neighborhood character and it's kind of a transitional experience. So you walk down Scenic and then you get to this house, it's solid wall. This is open. That's why we're proposing the open gate, not the closed gate. But it gives a physical barrier to keep people from walking onto the property. They found people wandering around the property and all that sort of thing. So also, the design, I think it said somewhere it wasn't consistent with the design language in the neighborhood. But we think it is, everyone's familiar, so the iron gate itself, everyone's familiar with, getting coffee in the morning and seeing this beautiful piece of ironwork that's consistent with Carmel and living in Carmel. This is another one, everyone's familiar with 7th and Dolores and how So we're talking about making a beautiful piece of artwork there. And we think it's a reasonable request. Also, I don't think it's setting any precedent because there's only one house that's the first house that's open when you walk down Scenic. So that's why we're back. If there's any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We'll take that under consideration.
Thank you.
Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item today?
I'm Paul Doble and Son Custom Homes. I built a house for Art and Farah, and I've been out there for years. I live right on Ocean at the Sea Nymph. I'm renting that house. I drive by there every day, and there's many occasions where I have people down their driveway standing at their front door, and I have to stop and say, "What are you doing here?" They don't know Art and Farah. They're taking pictures of their door. They're taking pictures of their house. They're on their property. And that's why Farah is very upset. There's people on her lot, not on the street. Scenic, you know how busy that is. Everybody walks up and down Scenic. I've had people on that property doing things they're not supposed to. When we had bathrooms there, they were constantly, we had to put a lock on the bathroom. They were constantly using the construction bathroom. And that problem hasn't stopped. I go by there every day because I'm friends with them. When I leave my home, I drive by that way. And it's upsetting to see people on their property. And she wants this, this ironwork. Coastal Fabrication's gonna do that gate. It's gonna be a beautiful, solid brass. It's not gonna rust. It's gonna be a work of art. And if you look around Carmel, that's part of the character of Carmel, to have something like this. So, I mean, that helps you. It's a serious thing going on, We've already had that one rape here in Carmel, and Farah's very nervous in her home. So she would appreciate you guys allowing her to build that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Last call. Anybody else? All right, bring it back to council. Eric, did you want to rebut anything? I didn't think so. Thank you. All right, council members, my concern is here that it seems a little subjective to deny it as it is. I mean, I can see there's a neighborhood consistency issue, but I think that without any specific design guidelines, we're kind of being objective and singling out this one applicant. I'd like to see this referred to, I'd like to go ahead and approve this as it is, but I'd also like to go ahead and say that I think we should get this design traditions group working on some sort of a design guidelines for this, so we have a policy we can stay about. Brian?
I would support allowing this gate to be built just for not just because of the rest of the block is fenced in. And also I know that there's been a lot of people when the tourists come and they walk around the houses, and that was a complaint a few years ago with some of the people that live down there. They were having real struggle with tourists walking around their property. And also I think that the fact that they're taking that front gate that's solid and making it iron to make it look a little bit more airy and bright, and you can see the beautiful architecture in there, I would support this. I think, I think it would be important to have, if I lived there, I know that that's what I would want. So I'm going to go with that. Thank you.
My left.
Yeah, I have a different view. I agree with the staff treatment that gates are for pedestrians and that driveway gates are extension of fences, and I think that driveway gates should be extensions of fences. I agree with that. I also think that we as a body should try to support the Planning Commission in their sort of assessment of what the design rules sort of mean and how they're implemented. And finally, I would say, to my question earlier, there is a 90% solution, and that was to install a fence down the side of the driveway that would keep people, while yes, it would allow people to wander, I guess, the driveway, it would not allow people to walk up to the front door to access the front door. So I believe that there's a 90% solution that doesn't involve us setting what might be, giving the impression of setting sort of a precedent here. And I would prefer to see the fence run down the driveway.
Karen?
Well, the house on the corner, what is it, Tavern on the Green or whatever it's called, does not have any gates across it, right next to it. What this says to me is the city ought to consider another restroom at 8th Avenue. If people are truly knocking on doors to use the restroom, that's a little bit disturbing. Personally, I like the plainer gate. We're not in the design phase right now, but I do think it's important when our planning commission makes decisions that we try to support them, because I think what they're trying to do ultimately is discourage the use of gates. And if we continue to allow gates to proliferate, then we never get to the point where we don't have gates all over town. So I kind of lean towards Councilmember Barron's solution to keep people away from their front door doing the 90-degree turn. I think the Iron Gate is very busy.
I think it's a little bit different area than the Monteverde Street or something. I mean, this is a heavily pedestrian travel path. There's a lot of people walking by there. Mm-hmm. And I can see where they would walk on that property, or I don't know. I don't see that gate as being this extension of a fence, really. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Councilman Barron, I do, but it's different. It's different than the fence that's there. It's an open iron gate, and so with a lot of view and air through it. And Mayor Chadwick's on.
Good open comment for Chadwick.
Okay, I missed him, I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right, we have a Zoom person apparently.
The Chadwick, please unmute yourself.
Mute. There you go.
There we go. Can you guys hear us?
Yes, we can.
Oh, very nice.
Thank you.
We would like to make a few comments before you make a final decision.
All right.
We've been on Zoom. We've heard all of this. So first of all, my name is Art Chadwick. Can you see us at all?
No.
No?
Wow. Let's go on video.
Let me see.
How about now?
Fine though.
You can't see us here?
No.
There's no video, but we can hear you.
Oh, I see.
All right. Anyways, first of all, my name is Art Chadwick, and sitting next to me is my wife, Farah. Thank you for taking the time. I hope everybody's having a nice evening. I want to start out by saying, look, we love Carmel. We've had a home here for 17 years. As Eric mentioned, we lived up on Carmelo for about 7 years. We bought this property almost 10 years ago. It took us nearly 7 years to get this house built, between the design, the permits, the approvals, and the building. And as you heard from both Eric and Paul, the amount of foot traffic, you guys, you know, it's crazy. And so many people come onto our lot. This is a safety issue at this point. I have people knocking on the door saying, you have a beautiful home. Do you mind if I come in and see what it looks like inside? Right. I mean, that is bold. We have people walking down the side of our house, peeking in our windows. We have people asking to use the bathroom. It's crazy. And I know that you're suggesting to put a fence down the side of the driveway. That looks terrible. It doesn't fit with the architecture. We've designed this gate so you can see through it. One of the commission's objections were they don't want, quote, compounds. They don't want houses hiding behind walls. So this is a very see-through gate. This is not a compound where you can't see the house. Most of the houses, as Eric mentioned, between 8th and Ocean on the west side of Scenic are compounds. You can't see the houses. They're behind tall, solid walls. This is not what we're proposing. And we're proposing to turn our front man gate into a see-through gate. So you saw the rendering. You can see the house. It looks beautiful. It'll keep people from walking on. We are very worried about our safety. Go down there on a Saturday or Sunday and just watch how many people there are in front of our home. And as Paul mentioned, a lot of people, they walk into our backyard as if, you know, we're on display for them to look at the house. We love our house. Eric did a great job designing it. Paul did a great job building it. People love looking at it. We think that's great, but they need to look at it from the street. We feel helpless. And I know the commission doesn't, you know, want gates, but I think we're an exception. Houses between 8th and Ocean on Scenic need some protection. And then the whole issue of bathrooms, that is absolutely true. The closest bathroom is down on Ocean. The other one, as we know, is the other end of the beach. People are looking for someplace to go. I'm not suggesting we build one at 8th and Scenic, but you can if you want. I plead with you, please. I know you don't want to make an exception. One other comment. So the commission turned us down for 2 reasons, our understanding. One, they didn't want compounds. I think the see-through fixes that. And the other is they didn't think the metal gates look good next to the wood fence. So one of the commissioner's suggestions was that we put stone out there. So this new design is not the same design that we presented to the commission. This is a new design where we have stone pillars on each side of the man gate and on each side of the driveway gate. So it looks very nice. These are stone pillars that are consistent with the rest of the stone in our front yard that you can see actually if you're down by the house looking back up near the street. So it's absolutely consistent with our design. The metal gates, the design of the metal gates are consistent with our house. It's consistent with the man gate on the side of our house. It's consistent with our railings on the inside of the house. It's consistent with the railings on our patio in the back of the house. And those were all suggestions from the commissioners' meeting. So I do take objection that we have not changed anything. We have changed a lot from that. It is true, we did not want to do the fence from the road perpendicular down to the house. It looks terrible. That's just, look, these are beautiful homes, guys. Carmel is a beautiful city. Let's not mess up the design by making us put a fence down the side of the driveway. That just doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. I appreciate your testimony. I was allowing that on a rebuttal, so that works. All right, so let me bring it back to council. So Mr. Chadwick seemed to make a point that he sees that there's an alternative design proposed that was not submitted to the planning commission, but there was a recommendation. Is that what I heard?
I think that's for you, Mr. Miller.
I'm going with this. It might be possible to refer this back to the planning commission.
Yeah, so this is a different design. We had the gate swinging, and one of the planning commissioners felt that you couldn't tandem park. So now the gate's sliding, so you could park a car there. Also, as Art said, one of the commissioners asked us to put some stone out on the street, so we did for the man gate and open that up. And I think the commission liked the man gate. The big problem that they're just trying not to set a precedent to make compounds. But this gate's only 4 feet high. All the rest of them are like 6, 8 feet high. So it's really a transitional approach towards, opening up the view of the house, but also giving some physical barrier. The other problem is if you just let people walk down the driveway, I hate to even say this in public, but I've seen people urinating on the house. And I don't want someone walking down the driveway because no one can see them because they've been walking along a solid wall and going down urinating on Art's house, which I wasn't trying to talk about tonight, but it's just, Art isn't overstating the problem. And so, I really hope that we can do 2 things here tonight. One is give the Chadwicks the dignity of having their beautiful home in Carmel. And the other thing is respect the Planning Commission's concern about having a compound, because that's why it's open now. The Chadwicks originally wanted all wood, and we've changed that to this. So I do think it's a reasonable request.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll bring it back to council. Council, I'm thinking maybe we should refer this back to planning commission for a redesign.
If there's new information and you guys have redesigned that gate a little bit, I think it should go back to planning commission.
I'm going to look to my colleague Evan on this one, but I don't believe that the iron gate, and I looked to Eric too to confirm this for me, but I don't believe that the iron gate is a new design from the planning commission. I believe that option was presented at the planning commission. So the iron gate is not new.
But the sliding part, is that new?
The action of the gate is new, but the commission's concern was about the compounding and the gates. Yeah. The stone columns are new as well, but I think it's worth noting, and Evan can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, that the planning commission over the last couple of years has taken exception to stone columns in fences, creating what they call estate manners. So that's actually been something they have not been supportive of. So it sounds like there's more conversation perhaps that needs to be had about that. But the iron gate, I just want to clarify that the iron gate was presented at the council, at the planning commission with the open view into the driveway.
All right, council members.
Well, I think that, you know, the option to have, with respect to Mr. Chadwick, I mean, I think that the option to have the gate run down the side of the driveway, you know, the planning commission, I think, is the arbiter of what, you know, that's the arbiter that the council is appointed to decide what appropriate design for the city is. And I think that, you know, I think that gate, I think that fence down the side of the driveway, you know, deserves a hearing at the planning commission.
Okay, so what are we doing here?
I would recommend that we send this back to the planning commission with the new information that was presented tonight, with the sliding and with the post, and if there's something that could be worked out to, with the planning commission and the applicant. That would be my suggestion.
I don't understand how I don't understand how we move the issue of driveway gates forward, like the issue of driveway gates in general and this specific, just by sending it back to the planning commission. Like, I don't.
Well, we've heard, I mean, this is something that's been percolating. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Yeah.
Just been percolating. So when Mr. Swanson and I delve into the design guidelines in the fences and walls section, we'll be sure to draft some suggested language on you know, the allowance of driveway gates. So you'll be seeing, the planning commission will see a draft of the design guidelines, not today or tomorrow, but in the near future, and the council will ultimately approve. So we'll have something to go on in the future.
And I think also, you know, again, without any disrespect to Mr. Miller, you know, the council has, you know, over the course of the decades, the council has struggled with different design guidelines for different areas of town for sort of various reasons, and whether things are appropriate here that aren't appropriate there. And I'm not prepared to, you know, this is not, you know, this is, you know, like Chip, you described this as moving to the nuisance. I mean, this is, you know, there are people that walk past a house. There have always been people that walk past the house. And while, you know, while the pandemic may have unleashed people's desires to be bad, you know, as Mr. Miller described, there are always people. Like, this is that neighborhood. And, you know, we talk about this a lot. You know, there's a house, I think on the corner of Scenic and 9th, where, you know, they built a glass house on the corner of Scenic, and there are problems, with it. And we've had this discussion about whether the same design guidelines apply, you know, for everywhere. And right now, I think it's always been the council's, you know, position that the same guidelines apply through all the city. Like, this stuff sort of matters.
I did open my comments
kinda stick to
originally
that.
by saying I'd like to see this go back to the design guidelines group for definition, so we have some firmer policy we can hang our hats on, instead of doing it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I think, so I'd agree with that. If we're talking about the gate across the driveway, then I think you know, that needs to wait until, my view would be that needs to wait until the design guidelines rewrite is sort of done. If we're talking about a gate down the driveway, you know, that was presented by staff as sort of an option, then I'd be okay sending it back for approval for that.
So under the first option, council, if you want to see a discussion and direction for driveway gates in the design guidelines, then the action on this application would be to deny the appeal. And again, we'll work on it. It doesn't preclude the Chadwicks from reapplying once we've developed design guidelines, if we're going to allow them in certain circumstances or certain neighborhoods. And you know, we can come back and discuss that.
Well, I wouldn't want to simply deny the appeal and prevent them from simply taking the application back to the planning commission without paying another $2,000 to install the fence down the driveway. Like, I would keep the application open if they want to do that.
I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think you can give us direction, as I think I've heard a consensus on. We'll develop the design guideline, and you can still refer to the planning commission at the Chadwick's, you know, willingness, and have the planning commission review the perpendicular fence that you're describing, Mr. Barron.
But also at that point, can't they discuss the idea of this new information or
Sure.
across it?
Sure. The stone pillars that Mr. Chadwick referenced, sure.
They should be able to discuss that with the planning commission,
So you're remanding it back to the planning commission, you could do that.
because there's new information.
Mhm.
That's,
I'll support that concept.
You know, one of the things that's troubling in town is that we have a lot of non-conforming fences, gates, et cetera. And they get grandfathered in time after time after time, so then you never get the impact that you want from the new design guidelines because of this grandfathering situation. And that's troublesome, because if the design guidelines, when they come out, say that we want the front yards a little bit more open and inviting, if you continue to allow things that we now then consider non-conforming, it just keeps that non-conformance going. So I think that's a problem, and I would like to see that discussed more at the design guidelines. How do we deal with non-conforming designs that continue to be grandfathered in? Because I know there are several large fences, too tall fences throughout the city that, you know, then somebody sees it and says, well, I want that. Well, you can't have that now because that's now non-conforming and won't be grandfathered in eventually. So I think the design guidelines should speak to this, and maybe we'll have some better sense of it.
So Brandon, if I might, Brandon or Evan, could I get you guys to come up? Do you understand the direction we want to go in?
It's kind of a two-part, Brandon. Once is currently on this appeal, and the second is our development and design guidelines for driveway gates.
Sure, sorry, I was reading something with Evan in the code. Could you repeat the question?
Does the mayor ask
Clear
you?
on where we want to go with this, what we're expecting of the planning commission.
What we would be expecting of the planning commission?
What's the council expecting of the planning commission?
If it's remanded to the planning commission, do you understand the direction? The
Yeah, so
council's
they
providing?
would be considering the new information that came through, you know, which would be the stone columns and the movement of, the directional movement of the gate. Those are the two new, I think that's the only two new things, yeah. Looked at the architect and he confirmed. So yeah, the planning commission consider those two. They could also, again, say to the applicant at that meeting, the planning commission would be supportive of approving the fence that returns into the house with leaving the driveway open, so they would have that suite of options in front of them.
Right.
Yep, exactly.
Mhm.
All right, do we have a motion to that effect?
So the motion would be to deny the appeal and remand it to the planning commission, consistent with the comments you just heard from Mr. Swanson.
is that, I guess
Yeah,
that
I'll
would.
second it. Any other discussion?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so what we're saying is that we don't want, if the planning commission continues to deny the application, we don't want to force the Chadwicks to have to reappeal and pay another appeal fee. So
Exactly.
without
We'd bring it
prejudice,
back.
they can bring it back to the council.
All right, Nova, could we call a roll?
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, before we move on, it's now 6:10. Do we need a bio break, or can we get through another item, guys?
The next one's gonna be kind of long, I think.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm recused, so.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right, yeah.
Stretch your leg, stretch your
Yeah,
leg.
I'm gonna get up and stretch my legs a little bit, but we'll go ahead and take this item up. It's appealed by Krista Ostrich Esquire on behalf of James and Marion Malani of the January 24th, 2024 decision by the Planning Commission to deny the after-the-fact rebuilding of a non-conforming structure that was torn down and rebuilt with the same non-conforming setback. Subject property is located Carmelo Street, 4 North Southwest, 2nd Avenue, the single-family residential district.
Yes, Mayor, I'm recused because I live near the property.
Yes, sir.
All right, good evening, council. Thank you. We're here to discuss an appeal of a previous planning commission decision on design study 21-186 Milani regarding reconstruction of a non-conforming building. Just a little bit of background. I'm not going to read all this to you because you're very capable of reading yourself, but back in October, it was the original application for a track 1 design study. That's effectively our lowest level of design study. It's a staff level review and approval. There were multiple meetings early on with the team, the applicant team, regarding the requirements to retain non-conforming structures, and we'll get into non-conforming structures a little bit later, but there are portions of this site where the walls are non-conforming to the setbacks. Then in January of 2022, following that staff level of design study approval, there was a building permit issue which included demolition, minimal scope, and they're okay to start construction on those approved plans that came out of that October approval. In May of 2022, there was a minor amendment, no additional demo that was proposed of walls. It was more with the windows and doors. And then in October of 2023, following a large amount of construction being done, there was a stop work order issued by the city for exceeding the scope of work. As I mentioned, demolition of the framing. It was after the fact. The city found it was not brought to us by the applicant team. We were informed that the reason for the demolition, the full demolition of the building and rebuild, was because of dry rot and foundation damage. And it was, however, demolished and rebuilt with the same nonconformities that existed initially. So then in November, there was an application to essentially keep those nonconformities, so they had to resubmit plans that showed the work that was done that was not previously approved. The director director review was not able to approve it at that time based on the interpretation of the code, and so it was referred to the planning commission though. The planning commission considered whether it was repair or reconstruction or demolition of more than 50% of the walls. That is sort of the trigger in our code that if you truly demolish more than 50% of the walls, that the site is considered demolished. And we'll get into, again, nonconformities here in a minute, but that was the consideration in December by the Planning Commission of whether it was repair or demolition. They continued the item at that time with direction to the applicant to provide more proof of where the rot and damage was, to see if more than 50% of the walls that required repair were truly rotten or damaged. January 2024, the applicant team came back with additional evidence, but still the Planning Commission determined that more than 50% of the work that was done fell under the definition of demolition and therefore required being brought into compliance. Just a little bit on this, sections of code that deal with non-conforming structures. You can see here I skip over A, B, and C of this section because they're not relevant, but D is the pertinent one here, and I've highlighted and bolded for just effect the demolition of any non-conforming building or structure. And again, that term demolition is important, at least in the way it was interpreted by the director and the Planning Commission. When something is demolished, a non-conforming building or structure, it's required that all new construction on site meet all the requirements for new buildings and structures. In other words, needs to come into compliance. Another section of code that was referenced had to do with alterations and enlargements in non-conforming buildings. A lawful non-conforming structure can be maintained and repaired or altered as long as such maintenance or repair or alteration does not increase the nonconformity. This is where the Planning Commission considered repair and alteration versus demolition. Again, the Planning Commission found that more than 50% of it was considered by definition a demolition, and therefore they did find that the structure needed to be brought into compliance. Another definition for you just out of our code of what demolition means. Act of reconstructing, removing, taking down, or destroying all portions of an existing building or structure. Again, I don't need to read this whole thing to you, but these were the definitions and terms that were used when the Planning Commission considered this project on referral from the director. There's a couple of nuances here that when you're considering the totality, like how do you get to that 50% of demolition? Our code also throws in here that non-conforming portions of any wall are counted as removed or taken down, even when retention of these portions are proposed. And this is important to remember and think about, because when you're deciding whether or not an entire structure has been removed, even if those non-conforming walls remain in place, when you're calculating the 50%, you're supposed to count those, and that is instructive as to whether or not the whole house has been considered demolished, because remember, over 50% is demolished. So if you add up those non-conforming walls that even may still stay in place, if you go above 50%, it's considered demolished. And then just another definition, ordinary maintenance and repair. Again, the conversation at the Planning Commission was whether or not this was repair or demolition. And so this is our definition of ordinary maintenance and repair. It does talk about work undertaken to restore any deterioration of or damage to a structure involving no change to materials or design. So again, there is room for interpretation in here, but the Planning Commission landed on demolition. They didn't feel that this fell under maintenance and repair. Here's just some pictures, and I know that the applicant team has provided pictures, and we could show you pictures all day long, but this is from underneath the house, looking out. You're on your site visit today. You looked out. You're looking out onto the south elevation. We walked up the south side of the house. This is you're basically under the house right now, looking out into that. You can see all of the floor joists were replaced, all the structural framing. Again, the issue at hand is that none of this work was approved through the building permit. No conversations were had with the city. There is a condition of approval on every project that applicants sign, and it was signed, saying that if you're going to make modifications to plans on site, you need to talk to the planning department first and submit revised drawings. That was not done, and I believe still to this date we have not seen revised drawings for all the work that was done. This is the south elevation again that we walked today. You can see this is a diagram that we showed to the Planning Commission. Again, we talked about nonconformity with setbacks, and I explained this on site, but for the benefit of everyone else, this house is non-compliant to the composite setback rules, meaning that as you walk through a site in space, drawing a line each side, the total setback between both sides always has to be at least 12.5 feet. So for example, if on the north side of the property, the setback is only 3 feet, which is allowed, the south side of the property would have to maintain a 9.5 foot setback. So that's why you see houses jogging in and out. And so the yellow line and the yellow box and the red box show how much of the existing house would have to be pulled back in order to meet those composite setbacks. Again, this has all been constructed. You saw this right here. This is the same area we're looking at right now. You can see that the portion of the house that juts out towards the south, that's the area in the red. The portion that goes back in towards the north is the area in the yellow. So with that, staff's recommendation is to adopt a resolution to deny the appeal. We're available for any questions, and I know the applicant team has a presentation they'd like to share with you as well.
Any questions of Brandon by council?
Have we heard from any of the neighbors?
I'm trying to recall if we've heard from any of the neighbors. We've heard from several architects locally.
We did hear from one neighbor, Brandon.
Yeah,
Let me
thanks, Chip.
flip through the pack. The council, you've packet. Yeah, the Fettermans. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's Chadwick. I apologize.
There was, I think
apologize
we
for
got
that.
one. I think there was one, but I don't have it.
Well,
I stand corrected. No, that was for the Chadwick project. I apologize.
Brandon, I have a question. I'm wondering, was on the plans, was it noted the removal of these walls was not permitted? Was there any writing on the plans themselves?
There was. So the plans were noted. So we go through, and you know this, Mayor, better than anybody probably, but we go through 2 rounds of review. There's the planning review when you get your design review, and then there's the building permit review. So early on, in the very first round of plan reviews that were done by the planner, Marty Waffle, there were notes put on in the first round of reviews in red letters that say, you know, there's non-conforming walls here, they have to remain. They're highlighted on the plans. It was all in the plan check comments in red lettering. So it was written on the plans, and I know that Ms. Waffle had conversations with the applicant team as well on site and in the office.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions of Brandon before I open it up?
Yeah, I have one question. So could repairs have been done without going back to the non-conforming? When they found the dry rot?
Could repairs have been done without having to bring the non-conforming into compliance? Is that what you're asking?
No, they went ahead and continued the nonconformance, which they were not supposed to.
Right.
How would they have repaired the wall that they tore out and stayed within the required definition?
In order to not give up their nonconformity, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's hard to say because we didn't get brought in. So we didn't get to see the extent of what the rot was. We've seen pictures. This is why, it's always best to reach out, and why we have those conditions that say, if you have to make changes, talk to us, because we do try to find creative solutions when we can. The code defines demolition as removing the structure, basically. So there could have been opportunities to sister, which is, putting new boards along with old boards, where you're not effectively demolishing an entire structure and then rebuilding it. Because that's really what happened, is the entire structure was demolished and then rebuilt versus repaired, as far as we can tell. But again, we weren't brought in and we didn't really notice it until the stop work order was issued. So it's hard to say for sure, but we would have explored options with them.
So there might have been a way to repair.
Possibly, but I don't want to say for sure because I don't know. But
okay, thank you.
Okay, unless there's anybody, I'll look at the applicant. Is the representative of the applicant, the appellant present? How long would you like for your testimony?
Good evening.
how long would you like for your testimony?
Oh, 4 minutes, if that's allowed.
4 minutes, you can have as much as you like, actually.
Well,
Okay,
then I'll
so
take 5.
Okay, 5, and I'll allow 3 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank
Okay,
you.
5 minutes.
Good evening, council members. My name is Krista Ostojic, and I represent the property owners Jim and Marian Milani. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm going to give a brief presentation. Brandon did a great job of explaining most of the facts. I have a couple of comments I will make to those, and then I will turn it over to our team, which will be Ryan McNichol, the contractor, Adam Jesselnick, the architect, and then the property owner, Ms.
Are they
Milani
all
is
part
here.
of your presentation? You asked for 5 minutes.
I'm sorry?
You asked for 5 minutes. I was asking how much time do you need for your presentation in its entirety?
12 minutes?
Okay, 12 minutes.
Thank you. As Brandon just described, the original approval was given back in 2021 for a significant remodel. Mr. McNichol is going to talk a little further about this, but I have included with the slideshow and your packet the demolition plans that were originally granted. You can see from the shading that there was a fair amount of demolition that was allowed from the start. Obviously, what was done is more than is outlined in that photo. Once the plans were approved and the contractor got in there to the site and started pulling the property apart, he will discuss this more, but I just wanted to briefly show you some pictures of the existing conditions. This is what was found when I believe it was a patio off that southeast side of the building. You can see a couple closer pictures of the rot. Again, the contractor will go more in detail, but this is what he found when he got into the building. Mr. McNichol had several conversations with the building inspector who came on site many times. In hindsight, we recognized that was not enough. And at the point we realized what the existing conditions truly were and the extent of the termite damage and dry rot, we should have gone back and set up a meeting with Brandon and had Brandon come out to the site. We did not do that, and I wanted to say, I'm sorry, in hindsight, that should have been done. We should have gone to the Planning Commission. We should not have simply relied on the building inspector. But I want to be clear that nothing was hidden. The building inspector was well aware of the situation on the ground the entire time. The whole neighborhood was well aware because the building was pretty much taken apart, and anybody who drove by or saw it would have realized what had happened. Now, Mr. McNichol went through and replaced the wood that needed to be replaced because obviously he can't construct a residence on top of the rotted, termited damage, which we saw. So you'll see some pictures of the completed construction. I think Brandon showed some of these pictures, and I'm going to let Mr. McNichol explain it a little bit more, but you'll see the cantilever deck on the left-hand side. That is part of the approved plans. You'll see the steel beaming around the garage on the right-hand side. That is a part of the approved plans. The middle picture shows that where the conditions allowed, the existing lumber was used. Brandon did a really good job of setting forth the code, but I just want to bring it a little more in focus that there's really a conflict amongst the code. And I think that's why this has been such a difficult project. It's put my clients in a bad position, the contractor, and obviously the city planning department and planning commission as well, because you can read the code in two different ways. So you'll see what Brandon laid forth, that alterations, maintenance, and repair of a non-conforming structure are allowed so long as the non-conformities are not increased. There's no dispute. The non-conformities in this case were not increased. As Brandon stated, there is a definition in the city's code of alterations. And if you read that definition, and I'm not going to read it for you, but I have highlighted what I think are the really important portions. And one important word in there is demolition. So what it says is that demolition can be considered an alteration. And if we go back to the code section regarding alterations, alterations are allowed in a legal non-conforming structure. So by just reading those two code sections together, you can see that the definition of alteration is very broad in scope and encompasses all the work that was done by Mr. McNichol on the Milani residence, including demolition. Now the problem we have, actually one more. There's one more further provision of the code in which we believe gives the city flexibility in these types of situations. And this is code section C that I have set forth above. And what this code section says is we recognize that our modern building codes require some changes to be made to existing conditions. And so long as essentially all the other provisions are followed, that the city can allow those modifications. We believe in this particular circumstance, the condition of the building, and Mr. McNichol, the licensed contractor, will come and speak about this, but there's just no way that he could have built a home on what was left there. His license doesn't allow him to do so. It was too rotted and too damaged to safely and soundly build a residence on top of it. So we believe that's why the city has included this provision in the municipal code to recognize for situations in which the conditions on the ground do not allow for building to the current code. Now, going back to our definitions portion, we really think that there's a conflict within the municipal code. And it appears, based on what has been approved in the past, that the strict definition of demolition for legal non-conforming residents has not been applied by the city. I submitted substantial evidence in the packet, and I don't mean to go over it again, but there's currently one home that's under construction in the city right now. It's legal non-conforming. If you use the definition of demolition that includes that Mr. Swanson set forth, that makes any legal nonconformity demolition and any remaining wall less than 8 feet in length a demolition, then that house couldn't be approved. If you take that strict definition and you apply it to the Milani house may have been more than 50% demolition. That strict definition is going to result in the inability of property owners to remodel legal non-conforming residences. And Mr. Jesselnick is going to speak to that a little bit further in our presentation tonight. But we feel that the decision the Planning Commission made was a policy decision. And they were forced to make that decision because there's a conflict in the code. So we are here today in front of the City Council as the decision makers and the policy setters for the city of Carmel to ask you to make the decision on what the policy should be going forth. And if the policy is going to be that legal non-conforming structures are going to be held to a very strict definition of demolition, one, that policy should be applied fairly to every legal non-conforming structure within the city. And two, the result of that is going to be that we have a lot more complete demolitions, true traditional demolitions of what we're all thinking about in a demolition, and that's a structure coming all the way to the ground and being redesigned. And the reason is for that is that this creates a lot of uncertainty. And Mr. McNichol is going to talk about it a little bit further, but obviously when you're going through the process, you have no idea of what is inside the walls, and you don't know what's inside the walls until you get the permits approved. But at that point, there is a lot of time and money that have gone into the process, and it just really creates a very difficult, unworkable situation for property owners and design professionals here in the city. Thank you very much for your time. I will be available to answer questions.
Nova, how much time was used? 9 minutes. Okay.
Is that time remaining, or she used?
She used.
So she had how much time total?
She used 9 minutes.
Of 12, yeah. So we're getting a little tight cramp for time here, set by your own self.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for your time today. My name is Ryan McNichol, general contractor, and I wanted to explain to you guys in more depth about the exact situation that we had going on here. There were several meetings on site with the building inspector, and clearly we should have said, hey, wait a minute, we need to bring planning department involved with this. They got to see what's going on here with the compromised materials that were on the building. The other challenge that we faced on this project was the approved proposed foundation. Would you be able to slide over to the foundation plan? Or
Brian, use that clicker. There you go.
Here we go. So if you see on this plan here, you can see the dark blue line that shows the original foundation. And then on the bottom left corner, you can see the gray shaded line that shows the proposed foundation. And that's all new stem wall and footing foundation. In this photo here, excuse me, that photo here, those two pier blocks with a post and a 4x4 beam, that was the old perimeter foundation. And now we've proposed in that gray shaded area, it goes along from the east side, the bottom of the image, and it's also on the far left side, the whole south side of the building is all new foundation. Whereas before, it was just these two pier blocks in that beam, and in the foreground of kind of the white post and beam, that was the old perimeter foundation, which clearly we can't work with that. So we tore that out, and all the material between that and the original foundation, which is shown on the blue line, all that material was the bad material that we removed and properly built. In the opposite corner of the building is where we saw the termite damage, where we replaced joists there to assure the structural integrity of the building as well. On the top left corner of the image, I would say the southwest corner, that's where all the structural steel beams were that you saw in the previous images. And that area was all per approved plans that showed all new floor package. And on the bottom right corner, the approved foundation design, you can see there's the dark gray shaded area of all the tall stem wall construction that has mechanical and laundry room below that. There's no way to shore up any of that floor as well, so that area was removed. So, technically, getting this building assembled properly and also adhering to the approved foundation plan, we had to remove this compromised material to make sure that we built the building right. I couldn't live with myself to try to salvage some of that material and patch it or piece it or scab it together and then put it in and say, well, a couple of years that may settle and then you're gonna have issues, and then we have bigger problems than we do right now. So there was one mention that Brandon had too, that there were some changes to the building, but in this case we've adhered to the exact same building envelope and all the same footprint. We haven't tried to gain square footage, and in fact we've actually tried to set up the envelope just barely smaller than the pre-existing building that was there. We reduced the ridge height even by 1 inch. So it's been our goal to adhere to the plans and make our best effort to make sure that the building was sound. So I'll let Adam Jesselnick speak at this point and give you the rest of the information.
Thank you.
Hello, Adam Jesselnick, the architect for the Milanis. I'll keep my comments relatively brief because I know that we've getting close to exceeding our time. Thanks, Ryan, for your remarks, and thanks, Ms. Ostojic, for outlining the sort of the conflicts that we see in the building, the building code and the planning zoning ordinance in this case. I do want to emphasize that the plans for this project did go through the city's regular process, in this case for a track 1 design study. We worked very closely with the planning staff and throughout the building plan review, and the plans that were approved and the plans that Ryan has been working with are essentially what you saw when you visited the site today. Basically taking an existing home, but bringing it up to today's modern building code standards. I think it's really critical what Ms. Ostorich pointed out about the discrepancy in the code, where it does define and allow for alteration to these non-conforming buildings. But there's really no way to know when you start a project exactly how much damage might exist within the walls that we can't see. And it creates a very uncertain and untenable situation for property owners who need to have some ability to know before they start a project sort of what they're getting into. In this particular case, and in any other non-conforming project that I've worked on, there is the possibility that dry rot is discovered, termite damage is discovered, other problems within the walls like faulty electrical wiring, old fire damaged material or water damaged material. And we rely on the building code standards to inform us what needs to be replaced and brought up to code. And so under the definition or the determination of the Planning Commission, there's not really a way for a homeowner to both maintain and repair structures that are damaged, and also to do any type of sort of remodel project that might involve, replacing a kitchen or rebuilding a deck, any of the types of projects you could imagine. So here we have sort of everything happening at the same time, but because construction is so dynamic, we didn't have a way to predict exactly how much demolition might be entailed and the extent of the dry rot that was found. So we're asking you to take a look at this, and I'd like to have the property owner have her chance to speak as well, because I think she prepared some remarks. Thank you very much.
Sir.
Good evening. I'm Marion Milani. My husband Jim is dialed in on Zoom. Thanks so much for your time this evening and your consideration. I appreciate it greatly. In March 2018, we purchased a small home at Carmel on Camino Real, and we love spending time here with our family. In 2020, a larger home became available nearby on Carmelo, and we were thrilled for the extra space for our family and the ocean view. But the house was in terrible need of maintenance. The previous owners, we were told, had barely used the home in decades, and so a lot of repair and maintenance was really needed. We very specifically sought out local professionals with knowledge and expertise and success in Carmel-by-the-Sea. We hired Adam as our architect, and we knew, and we learned from Adam, and we discussed the importance of architectural diversity and preservation in Carmel. So we worked with Adam to embrace the unique look of our home and try to remodel. And so my husband and I prioritize sustainable, non-toxic building materials and practices, and we plan to remove the gas line for an environment-friendly, all-electric home. We never considered tearing the house down. We assumed that the permits and processes for remodeling would be smoother, faster, and more efficient than a new build. We hired Ryan McNichol, another local professional with a great track record. He'd recently completed a job near our previous home on Camino Real, and we were really impressed with his work. We were excited for our project to begin, and we were in regular touch with Ryan, and he told us everything was going great. I remember after one inspection, the building inspector had praised the quality and workmanship of the work completed. So we were We were shocked when the stop work order came in, and it has been personally devastating. I dread coming to Carmel. There is an implication that we are scoundrels trying to get away with something. But we just want the house that we have approved plans for. The decision of the Planning Commission feels punitive. We have to remove newly built foundation and framing. That means concrete and steel. These are highly carbon intensive materials, and wood are going to have to be dug out, hauled away, and disposed of, all to increase the setback between our home and one neighbor by less than a foot. I mean, how is that good for our community? Our property has been a blue tarped dirt pile eyesore for 5 months, and I can't even begin to guess how long it will take to get new plans drafted, submitted, and approved. Our lesson here is that we should never have tried to remodel. We should have simply torn the whole house down and started over from scratch with the design of our choosing. We thought the city wanted homeowners to preserve the character of older homes in Carmel, but now, after all that we have been through, I do not know why any homeowner would take on the risks associated with remodeling an older home in this community, and I'm very sorry that we did. So again, I thank you for your attention this evening.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to testify? Yes, come forward.
Good evening. My name's Ira Duran. I'm the framing contractor on this project. I'll be quick because I know you guys have heard a lot. I just wanted to point out one thing that hasn't really been spoken about. There's been a lot of discussion about the nuance and the complication of 50%, what 50% demo means. But what I'd like to point out is in the approved plans, there's approval for 50% new foundation, 70% new floor, 90% of the walls get affected structurally or remodeled, rebuilt, adjusted, 100% new roof. So it's easy to get confused on what exactly 50% demo means. I won't take up any of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
We have a hand raised on Zoom.
I see. Wait until it comes.
Mayor, council, staff, Carol Hall, as a resident. I don't know these people, but I don't feel like there was an intent to defraud here, and I think that's an important point. I know of other cases, track one cases, one right next to me, where they have taken the house down to studs, and we're talking about year 3 now that they're still working on this track one project that never went to the Planning Commission. Nothing has been done to them. There's been nothing. And this continues on. I think that we need to apply our standards consistently. I know that the lawyer talked about 2 other cases where they did not get their hands slapped. And I feel that it's really not fair. I understand what the Planning Commission and the Planning Department is doing. They want to apply standards and make sure that people adhere to them. But I feel like I feel like it is punitive at this point, and that I hope that you would be lenient toward these people, if for no other reason, for ecological reasons, not to have to tear out things and put in other things. And I just feel like this is something that requires some bending a bit, and that we should be looking at our track one people who come and defraud or misrepresent what they want to do over the counter, and with no repercussions whatsoever, no follow-up, so no compliance issues. I think this is a good reason to start looking at those issues, but not to penalize these people at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in the room?
Good evening, Dixie Smith. I live on San Antonio, just below this home. I don't know the owners, but this is my city of Carmel, and I just feel that we should speak up when we're concerned, especially with all of the information that was in the paper and talking. The neighborhood has talked about it. And I appreciate what our planning department went through and all the points, and I thought they show they've looked at it, but my concern is they weren't trying to, in my opinion, sneak in a little room to the master bedroom or do an extension, make a major change. They kept the footprint. And in the neighborhood, it's the same house. So I just would like to recommend that I think we're taking a club against a smaller project. And yes, my understanding, an inspector gives advice, gives suggestions. He's not there to be mean, as much as sometimes when we're building a house, we think, boy, that inspector's just, we don't want them around because they're mean. Well, it's not true. We've done enough in our homes around here that they come in, they're friendly, they give advice. But to close on it, if anyone was taking a misstep, it should have been a lot sooner on the inspections. I'm just simplifying, but thank you for letting us speak it in our city.
Thank you, Dixie. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in the room?
Hi, I'm Joe DiNucci, resident. I own a 120-year-old house and an 80-year-old house. And I'm fortunate I've never dealt with any of these issues, but I followed the Milani situation as closely as I could over the last few weeks. And just as a fellow citizen and resident, I would appeal to the council to apply some compassion, some empathy to the Milanis, who apparently have ticked every box they could, tried to follow every instruction as honestly as possible. The neighbors don't seem to have a problem with it. And I'll just voice my support. I hope, as a resident, to see the council support this sincere effort by residents to improve a home here.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in the room? All right, I'll take it out to the public. I see Brian Sowers. You have your hand up. Brian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi. I know in the opening statement that I had sent actually a letter into the city, so I was probably the only letter that you received, so I'm not sure whether that was ever included, but I did include a letter. So I guess my major concern here was that, you know, we have a fairly prominent architect and a builder that has built a number of homes in the city, and essentially they didn't follow the rules. And I know the planning committee, the planning commission, and the building department in the city of Carmel is about as fair and available on any issues related to either a reconstruction or a new home. They're always available and always amenable to having discussions. And my concern here is that that didn't happen here. And that if we allow this, we're setting a precedent. There are a lot of other homes that have been done in town where people have spent lots of funds to keep their house at the 50% level so that they could maintain their nonconformity. And if we allow this to happen, and again, I agree, I think the new owners want to do something and keep the thing, but we've got rules, and we have a building department here that bends over backwards to help the residents remodel stuff, and yet we've got an after the fact request here to allow something that's outside of the code. And my concern is once we'll be setting a precedent here that will maybe open the door for more of these appeals when we have a planning commission and a building department that spent considerable effort and time and energy on this particular case and ruled the fact that it needs to be brought into conformity with the code. And that's my 2 cents on this. And being a neighbor in the neighborhood, I feel for the owners, but unfortunately the architect and the builder didn't work with the city in a way that I think should have happened. And do we allow that now because of their mistakes? I'm just not sure. I'm not sure the precedent is a good one. So that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sowers. Is there anybody else in Zoom world wishing to speak tonight?
There are no other hands raised.
I don't see anybody. All right, you had some time left for rebuttal. Did you want to rebut? Don't feel you have to. You kind of used up your time anyway, but okay.
I just want to reiterate one point, that the code has a conflict. There's a conflict in between the definition of alterations and the definition of demolition as applied to legal non-conforming structure. And I would ask that the city consider the policy that has been applied in the past, as well as the policy and the effect of that policy of the decision that you make today. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
May I ask a question of anyone from the
Yes,
team?
may.
Anyone can answer this. Could you give us an idea if the owners are required to tear down the work that's been done, the cost estimate? I believe there was information in the packet, but just so we can share it with the public.
I put together a project estimate.
Right.
Setting it back, and it was upwards of.
Could you get on the microphone, please?
It was, I estimated the cost to set it all back, and it was almost $250,000. So it's upwards of 200,000.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, bring it back to council. Council members, I have a question of staff. Brandon, was there an inspection done on the foundation work that was not permitted?
The foundation work was permitted. This is the nuance with this, is the project that was originally approved, and Adam or Ryan can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but so help me out. But the project that was originally approved, or Marnie can weigh in here too, was actually to bring the foundation out to meet that wall. You saw the picture where it was on posts and piers. The foundation was always approved to come out and meet that wall, and so that was not built without a permit. That approval that allowed the foundation to be brought out essentially underneath that wall, which is a similar process to what happened here at City Hall. We had a wall that didn't get torn down. There wasn't a foundation underneath it. They excavated and brought a foundation out underneath it. That's what was going to happen to what was effectively a cantilevered or hanging member of the house. They're bringing the foundation out. So that was always the approval. What was not approved was the level of demolition of all of the walls. So there was an inspection on the foundation, which was one of the things when the building inspector went out, because you have to get a foundation survey to make sure that where you land the foundation, it aligns with what was in the approved plan. So when the foundation survey was done, it showed that yes, that foundation was brought out to the right line, but I think that's when there started to be questions about, well, what the rest of these walls and everything like that. So,
So the expectation was that the foundation wall would cripple up from there with framing to connect it to the floor above?
The foundation would, yeah, exactly, would connect to the existing wall that wasn't supposed to be torn out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Bring it back to council.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
I'll start. Yeah, what a tough one, and I feel for you, and I'm sorry that you had to go through this, to all parties. And while I do appreciate what our planning commission does, I would move to allow this based on, I think it was a maintenance issue, and I think that they did have approved plans. I agree with some of the speakers, and what Ms. Hall said is true. There's going to be a carbon footprint to the demolition of all of this. And so there was no increase to the square footage. It's just, to me, it seemed like a maintenance issue that maybe it should have been cleared up sooner, but yeah, I would vote to allow this to continue.
I agree with Councilman Richards. I feel that this family has already been punished enough. They've been put through months of anguish. They've been on the front page of the newspaper. They've been, it's not been a wonderful experience, let's say. So I feel they've been punished in that way. And then the financial costs of tearing this apart, it just seems very wasteful. And then it also seems like it's a financial punishment that's larger than the quote-unquote crime here. So I want to give them the leeway, and I would vote to allow it.
Well, this is a difficult one. I feel for both sides of the issue. I do think we need to look and see if there is a conflict in the code, because right now the perception is that these people believe there is a conflict. So I think that should, if we can, clear it up so it doesn't happen in the future. The plans were stamped about the demolition. This is not a new architect, it's not a new contractor. So I'm very troubled that they didn't, when they found the extent of this, immediately say, this could be a problem with the 50% that we're allowed to do. And I appreciate that you apologize for not doing that. But the mistake was not calling the staff right then to come take a look and say, what can we do here? Maybe it could have avoided all of this had that been done. And I think this happens more than we would like in town, where people just go ahead and do something rather than stopping and taking the time to do it correctly.
My tendency is to side with Councilmember Ferlito in a way, because I do think that there was a problem here with the actual, kind of cavalier nature of this. I'm not at all interested in villainizing the property owner or anybody else here. I think it was a standard mistake that could happen to anybody. But I do think that the rules are pretty rigid. On the other hand, I realize we're going to end up with a 2-2 tie and we go nowhere. So I'd like to figure out how we're going to bring a resolution to this.
Well, one of the things that was important to me was we did not hear from the neighbor, except for with the exception of Mr. Sowers, but we didn't hear from the adjoining or the adjacent neighbor. And I don't know, that weighed kind of heavy on me. And there was one other note I had, darn it. But anyway, that's...
You mean the adjacent property owner to the south, Mr. Richards?
Yes, that would... I mean, and the footprint wasn't expanded, and I like I want to be friendly to legalized or to legal non-conforming, because it does hang on to our heritage of homes. Instead of scraping homes, they're trying to remodel, and yeah, maybe they're non-conforming, but they're here, and I like the idea of that. So I don't want to villainize the legalized non-conforming and have people go through this sort of thing. I think the 50% demolition is just kind of a random number. So.
I agree, and just to add to that, the footprint was not expanded or changed, so if you saw this after everything was done, it would still be all in the same location. So.
I sort of disagree with you in that one of the points of trying to bring things into conformity is to get back to what we see in the present design guidelines. And this is, when you continue a nonconformity, when you have a nonconforming house, you have the opportunity to keep that nonconformity as long as you don't alter that part.
But
so
I own a legal non-conforming Murphy house.
Got it. I understand that, but you also will understand the rules if you go to do something about that. So I really do think following the rules and stopping and making phone calls would have probably solved the situation instead of months and months of this going on and on. So how do we get the public to realize our rules mean that they need to be conformed to if we continue to make exceptions to them? That's my dilemma. Because, then somebody says, which the attorney did say, well, this has happened here and this has happened here, therefore this is not unusual. And that sort of sets up the whole thing about, well, I don't think that they were trying to get away with anything. I think they just didn't realize how serious the issue was when they didn't make the phone call.
So Brandon, could I have you back up again? So let's get this clarification here. So the foundation was put in underneath the existing area, right?
That's right.
And then when they went to and opened it up, they discovered that it was rotted. So the intention was that it would always be there. If they come forward, what would you have said to them when they came forward?
Councilmember Filito asked the same question. It's hard to say for sure because I don't know the extent other than the pictures that I've seen of the rot, but, we certainly would have worked with them to try to find a solution.
To find a solution to maintain the wall in its current location.
Yeah, exactly. And if, we would try to find we always try to work as close to what we talk about back there is to try to get as close to the yes that the applicant is seeking while still honoring and protecting our codes and ordinances. And that's our mantra when we're working with folks. It may not be the exact yes that someone's looking for, but we do try to get as close as possible while protecting our design guidelines and our zoning code.
So with that said, I'll go ahead and support the intention.
So I'll make the motion to
You would uphold.
Uphold the appeal. I'll make the motion to uphold the appeal.
Could I?
And approve the project. Anything else?
I would just ask for when you're making your motion, just because we need a finding. I think I did hear you say that you would find that this is repair and maintenance. So I just want to get that clear because we will need to put together a resolution.
It was the last slide that you showed, 17.20 or something. I can't remember exactly, but it was the very last thing that you cited, and that's what swayed me. It seems like it was maintenance to me.
And that's an important, if this motion gets a second and passes, that's an important finding, Mr. Richards, because it creates a record that says that you're not creating precedent. And, the Milani project will have been approved based on the finding that you're stating that it falls under
17.7
ordinary maintenance and repair.
Yeah, and thank you, Chip. That's exactly what I was asking. I mean, we do want to make sure that findings like this are specific based on unique circumstances specific to this site. So it sounds like, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it sounds like what you're saying is your findings would be that this characterized as repair and maintenance.
Right. This is the reason why I'm approving, and then there's a lot of personal feeling why. But this would be the reason why I would do it.
And for me, it's also the fact that it says involving no changes to materials or design. That's what I'm going to hang my head on.
Yeah. Do we want to add that it's in-kind replacement of existing deteriorated or rotting material? If we want to add it or not.
Mm-hmm. So that's my motion. Do I have a second?
Motion is second. I don't know if we're going to call a roll.
Who seconded? I'm sorry.
Alessandra.
Yeah, could we just, we're just so we get the language correct, we're granting the, well, I'm just trying to say that we phrased it correctly. We're in favor of granting the appeal. Is that how we're phrasing it? Okay, I second that.
And then specifically with direction to staff to prepare a resolution consistent with the direction from council.
We'll bring that back next month and put it on consent. So again, we'll have a good record.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-1-1.
All right, now we do have another item coming up. I'd suggest a slight bio break. Why don't we take a 10-minute bio break? I think we'll be back at 7:10. right, let's go. Quiet in the back, please. Take your seats. All right. So the next item up is the sixth cycle housing element adoption and consideration of general plan, political coastal plan amendment, updating the housing general plan and adopting. We're going to recommend this for continuance to April 8th, 2024 at 4 p.m. But we have a little issue. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Here to, again, this item, it was recommended for continuance or is recommended for continuance. That's the adoption of the housing element. We are not here to adopt the housing element tonight. We're not asking you to make any decisions. We did confirm, as I mentioned, I think earlier, we did confirm with the city attorney that we can still discuss this matter because it was noticed. This is really an opportunity to give an update to the council and the community who's here, and I'm sorry I have to have my back to you. I never like that, but an update to the council and the community on where we are and hopefully clear up a couple of potential misunderstandings about certain parts of the plan or direction that was received. And as we have been throughout this whole almost 2-year process, we'll send out our typical communications after this meeting for anyone that's not here tonight to hear that direction from council. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. This is more or less to just show this has been a long and very involved process, which has been wonderful. We have very much enjoyed it, even though it has been hard work. I'm very proud of the team, which includes our ad hoc committee, city staff, EMC contractors, because we've done something that very few jurisdictions in our region have done to get this close to an adoption. So I'm not going to read those dates. I've left them up on there. But what's important on this slide is that the green highlight is where we're at today. If you remember back